So this panel is being moderated by Ken Lindell. Ken was elected to the state legislature. He's from Maine. He's a former one-term state representative. In addition to being chairman of the Republican Liberty Caucus of Maine, Ken was also chairman of the Ron Paul for President campaign in 2008 in Maine. He's also a certified financial planner, and he resides in Frankfort with his family, Frankfort, Maine. So please welcome Ken Lindell.
Thank you, Aaron. I'd like to, it's a great pleasure to introduce our distinguished panel this morning. We have with us Councilman Dan Halloran. He is a Republican member of the New York City Council, and he represents the 19th District in Queens. He was recently featured on Fox News exposing work-to-rule slowdown by local sanitation workers who were rebelling against Mayor Bloomberg's policies, refusing to clean up the December 2010 snowfall. Howard has worked as a lawyer for the New York Police Department, several district attorneys' offices, and prior to his election he served as the New York chair of the Northeast Regional Republican Liberty Caucus. We also have with us Representative Jamie Callender, who is an attorney, college professor, a former state representative who served in the Ohio House from 1997 to 2004. He represented a predominantly Democratic area despite being Republican, with a very strong libertarian streak. With his leadership, Ohio was able to greatly expand school choice. He was term limited out of office and currently serves as a professor of public policy at Kent State University. He and his family live in Lake County, Ohio, in the Cleveland metropolitan area. And we have with us Representative Terri McCormick, is vice chair of the Republican Liberty Caucus of Wisconsin, a former three-term state representative who represented Appleton and Neenah. Is it Neenah? She also is a two-time candidate for Congress. Terri pioneered one of the first state charter school laws in the country and formed the Wisconsin Charter School Association. She's an advocate of term limits and upheld her own term limit pledge. Legislation she authored expanded small business growth in the state of Wisconsin, and she also wrote a book, What Sex is a Republican? Stories from the Front Lines of American Politics and How You Can Change the Way Things Are. So what I'd like to do is get the panel started off with a series of questions. And let's really start with the real basic question. How did you get elected, and what lessons can your success at the ballot box be learned by other Liberty Republicans seeking to be elected? Well, we start with Dan.
Good morning. I'm really alone in the New York City Council. First of all, there's only 5 Republicans out of the 51 members to begin with, and I am, of course, the only one who's a Libertarian Republican. I had the fortune to run on 4 lines. New York State is a fusion state. I ran as a Republican, a conservative, an independent, and a Libertarian. It's the first time those 4 lines have appeared in one candidate's ballot box in 30 years. And I was very happy to have the support of all 4 of those parties, and I actually did have their support. I was outspent by my opponent approximately 10 to 1. I raised about $70,000. My opponent raised $780,000. I am in a district that's 3 to 1 Democrats to Republican. I represent now 200,000 people, which makes me the highest person elected on the Libertarian line in the country. Which isn't a bad distinction to have. There's a representative in Indiana who keeps claiming he is, but he didn't actually run as a Libertarian. He became one after he got elected, so he doesn't count. The way we ran our campaign, we had 3 phases, all of which were very important. The first phase was an incredible mailing program. We had the Traz Group in New York who did these full-color, glossy mailers. My favorite of which was a for sale sign. It was a red for sale sign. It was mailed out to almost every home in my district. You turn it over and it says, hold on to this, you're going to need it if Kevin Kim is elected councilman. And the reason that was is my opponent was a real estate attorney who spent a lot of time in the downtown Flushing area working with groups that had been destroying many of the homes in my district and putting up multifamily and high-rise buildings. Now, to give you a little bit of an idea, I know everyone thinks that New York City is this monolith that has skyscrapers everywhere, but my portion of the district is geographically the largest council district in the city of New York because the population density is so low. We have 1 and 2 family homes. They really do exist in New York City. I know it's hard to believe, but many people in my district were clinging to the last vestiges of suburbia in New York City. So they were very, very worried about overdevelopment coming in. The second series of mailers we did related to campaign donations. My opponent's campaign donations, 90% of them were from outside of New York City. Now, this is a New York City Council race. Why the hell are you raising money from California, Washington, D.C., and overseas? No, the answer is very simple. My opponent was the Chief of Staff of Congressman Gary Ackerman, a Democrat with numerous problems on the ethics side of things, who was heavily involved in some trades with the Chinese government and the Korean government, and is in fact right now being investigated by them. This was his Chief of Staff running against me. So they threw everything they could into this race. $750,000 is what you spend on a congressional race, not what you spend on a council race. So the mailers were one component. The second component was door to door. I visited about 6,000 homes of registered Democrats and independents. Went night after night from June until the election in November. It was very important. I got to get out and meet people. And in my community, knowing your constituents is the most important thing. If you make a personal contact, even though it's 3-1 Democrat to Republican, you can be known. And when you're a known quantity, it works. Now, it helped. I had gotten some headlines as a prosecutor. I had gotten some headlines as a defense attorney. My family had owned a business on Bell Boulevard, which is the largest commercial strip in my neighborhood. We owned a bar because we're Irish and that's what you do. When you're not being a cop or a fireman, which I was a cop first, and my brothers are firemen, so that makes it kind of easy. And so, knowing your community and your constituents, being able to reach out and touch them, and understanding the problems they're going through because you yourself are living in that community is essential. So the door-to-door operation was phase 2. It was very important, and it sort of brought things together. The third component is kind of abstract. I hired a couple of software engineers who merged a program called Lincoln Voter, which is a great, if you're in the Northeast, a great system. Basically what it does is it goes to the Board of Elections, pulls out all of the voter history over the last 20 years, puts it into a computer so you can sort it, look at it. You can see who votes, when they vote, how often they vote. You can't see what they voted, but you know what their registration is, so you have an idea. It also gives me demographic information. It tells me median household income. It told me what the ethnic makeup was, so I could do targeted mailers to different ethnic groups. Obviously, you send a certain message to the Irish community. It's a little different for the Italian community. It's a little different for the Spanish community. And in my district, I also have a very large Greek population. So we made sure we took a picture with the patriarch and got that out in the mail. This program then integrated onto a global positioning system, so I was able to look at these houses in blocks, look at these communities in blocks, and develop a strategy for my door-to-door operations and my phone operations. And where that became even more important is as my surrogates would go out, because obviously I couldn't visit every one of the 90-something thousand households, my surrogates would take down information. Things like, would they likely support this issue, that issue? We were able to put all of that information into a computer, help to sort of take the targeting of the mailing in a particular direction, and more importantly, on the eve of election and on election day, it made our get out the vote operation solid, because we knew by about 3 in the afternoon we won the election. How did we know that? We knew it because when we made our phone calls, when we were doing our exit polling, when we saw the numbers and the people who were actually at the polls, we knew those were people who had spoken to us, who were enthusiastic about our process and what we had brought to the table. And we knew they had come out very early to vote in a large number. And that was what enabled us to then pull out that evening everyone else we needed and get them to the polls. So at the end of the day, I won by almost 6 percentage points. And for a Republican, obviously, that was tremendous in the 3-to-1 district. When we got the numbers from one of the most heavily Jewish liberal areas, it's called the Laharv Complex, and I had split with my opponent, 49-51. And those numbers came in that night. It was like a definite, we knew we won. Because if we could take half the votes in a liberal, very liberal polling site, we knew that there was just no way that it wasn't going to happen. It's important for your campaigns to always keep that in mind, that you're looking at different targeted demographic groups, and they sometimes have very disparate issues that they're concerned with. That particular community is a co-op community, and so they were very worried about what's called a flip tax that New York had imposed on them. It was something I was opposed to from the beginning, and I was able to get that message out, and it brought 50% of the voters who would never in a million years think about a conservative Republican, let alone a liberty conservative Republican, to pull that switch, and they did. So those three components are what made my race possible, and I think it was a winning formula in New York City. Everywhere else, of course, is going to be a little different. In New York City, it's a different type of battle.